Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On July 16, 2021, a reporter asked President Biden what his message was to social media platforms when it came to COVID-19 disinformation. He replied, quote, "They're killing people," end quote. I know one of our missing witnesses referenced that quote earlier, but I can't ask him about those questions because he's been excused. Now, if you look at the chart behind me, this represents the consequences of vaccine science denialism. The arrow points to May 2021, when the vaccine became widely available in the United States. The deaths to the right of the arrow represent the continued wrath of COVID on our country, mostly among unvaccinated people in Texas and the southern U.S. And as you can see, 200,000 lives could have been saved. That's how many people were killed. Now, we used the same formula. That means that 15,000 lives could have been saved in Chairman Jordan's state of Ohio, or 5,000 lives could have been saved in Chairman Johnson's state of Louisiana. That's a lot of people. Many communities across the United States have been utterly devastated by COVID. Y'all know I represent parts of Houston, a big city, but I was born and raised in a small Texas rural community. In Duval County, where I was born, 1 out of 151 people died of COVID. In a similar community like Lamb County, Texas, nearly 1 out of every 100 people was killed by COVID. This death rate was one of the highest in the country and 3 times that of the nation as a whole. In fact, across the country, rural America's death rate has been nearly 40% higher than that of those in cities. This is tragically sad, and I believe it's vaccine denialism that costs these American deaths. Only 56% of rural residents are fully vaccinated versus 67% of their urban counterparts. In my home state of Texas, it's estimated that 2,000 lives could have been saved if we had reached the vaccination levels of places like Vermont or Connecticut. Mr. Sauer, you signed the Missouri v. Biden's plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction. That motion claims that Biden's statement that the social media companies are, quote, killing people by letting vaccine disinformation spread was somehow illegal censorship. I frankly cannot disagree with you more strongly, but I have a simple fact question for you today. Mr. Sauer, for you, do you agree that COVID vaccine saves lives? Just a yes or no, please. Mr. Sauer, I asked for a yes or no. Yes, 2 simple words, yes or no. So you're Harvard trained, you pretend to be an expert here, and you cannot answer the simple question of whether or not you agree that COVID vaccine saves lives.
Gentlemen, Mr. Sauer, can you put
Mr.
you hit the
Sidlerman,
microphone
will you
there?
answer my question since it looks like our Harvard colleague over there cannot?
Yes, I believe vaccines save lives.
Thank you. Mr. Sauer, you also signed the Missouri versus Biden Second Amendment complaint, which criticized Twitter for removing content suggesting that, quote, face masks do not work to reduce transmission or to protect against COVID-19. Well, as a journalist in Texas did a lot of the work that apparently you haven't, and compiled 49 studies, all showing that masks effectively reduce the rate of COVID transmission. Mr. Sauer, yes or no again? Do you agree that face masks stop the transmission of COVID?
I refer you to the
Sir, a yes or no question?
Again, Congresswoman, I
yes
refer
or
you.
no question, sir.
I refer
It
you.
is my time. I want a yes or no. If that's too hard for you, then I'll just move on. So I'll ask you, Mr. Zigman, do you agree that face masks stop the transmission of COVID?
My understanding is the scientific evidence is yes, it does.
Right, so Mr. Sauer, your motion for preliminary injunction claims that even U.S. Department of Health and Human Services efforts to gather information about how widespread COVID-19 disinformation could somehow be censorship. Knowing how the American people are being lied to is not censorship, but I guess you might be scared what the data will show. Mr. Sauer, again, a yes or no, do you believe that public health experts need data about the impact of disinformation in order to stop people in places like rural Texas from dying from this pandemic?
Federal officials should not be demanding data about people's political and social opinions expressed on social media.
Yes or no, please.
I reiterate what I
Do you
say.
not,
Under the
you're
First
refusing
Amendment,
to answer my question.
under the First Amendment,
You're
federal
refusing
officials should
to
not
answer.
be
Thank you,
demanding
Mr.
that.
Sigelman, do you agree that data on disinformation is necessary to help stop these lies from spreading?
Yes.
Thank you. You're an actual expert on disinformation.
Ladies,
so I
time has
thank you.
expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Chair, now I recognize the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr.